Which is what if Naruto was rejected by Kakashi and got a chance to remove his mask and become stronger part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. What is the meaning of this case cage? Sarutobi asked calmly, although seething slightly inside. He couldn't lose his temper now though. Oh, I'm sure you know what's going right now, Hokage Dono. Or should I say, Sarutobi-sensei, the case cage replied, his voice changing towards the end. Orochimaru, Sarutobi noted, not really surprised. Danzo was correct after all. Why am I not surprised that the snake is behind this? Ku, it's marvelous though, Orochimaru replied as he ripped of the mask of his face along with the fake skin to reveal himself. Pale skin and slitted yellow eyes that many knew and feared. Look at all destruction that spreads around. With only a few words I manage this. Sarutobi looked around and saw what his former student meant. Everyone was fighting and in the distance he could see 3 giant snakes destroying the village walls. It was almost terrifying how everything went to hell in mere moments. So you're after my head then I guess, Sarutobi said. Precisely, Orochimaru said with a sick grin before he jumped back to avoid a kick. His sensei was now standing in a stance wearing his battle armor. Ku, it won't be as easy as I thought, right, old man? I will do what I should have done all those years ago, my old student. I will end your life today, Sarutobi said with finality as he stared his student down. I better call in for reinforcements then, Orochimaru said with a smirk. Making several hand seals, he slammed his hands into the ground. Kuchios, Edo Tensai, one by one, 3 coffins began to rise out of the ground. As 2 were fully out, Sarutobi sent a barrage of shuriken to stop the 3rd one. The 2 coffins suddenly opened and 2 figures stepped out. No, Sarutobi gasped as he looked at the 2. Ku, say hello to your predecessors, Sorobi-sensei, Orochimaru said with a smirk as he motioned at the 2. Senju Hashirama and Senju Tobirama stood in their full dead glory as they looked around. Only real evidence that they weren't really alive were the cracks across their faces and black sclera in their eyes. So someone finished this technique, Tobirama said gruffly. I told you not to create this technique, little bro, Hashirama replied with a whine. See what happened now? Shut up Hashirama, Nadame said, annoyed. Hashirama-sensei, Tobirama-sensei, Sarutobi said quietly. I really hoped we wouldn't have to meet again like this. The 2 heard him and looked at him. Saru-kun, is that you? Hashirama asked with a grin. Man, you grew old. Before Sarutobi could reply, Orochimaru slipped 2 kunai with strange notes attached into the necks of the dead Hokages. The blades sunk into their necks as Orochimaru smirked. I will not be the one to kill you today, sensei. They will. You despicable monster, Sarutobi growled. Orochimaru only smirked as he sent his puppets to attack. 4x. As the confusion and panic spread across the village, Naruto could only stare in shock at the grotesque sight in front of him. Standing taller than before, Gaara's physical appearance was upgraded with a pair of huge sand arms. He also had a huge sand tail on his back. He looked like some kind of a monster and the bloodthirsty grin on his face didn't calm Naruto at all. I will have your blood, Uzumaki. Gaara screamed out as he lunged at Naruto, who barely had time to evade, not expecting Gaara's increase of speed. Jumping back, the blonde sent several wind blades at his opponent which did nothing more than enrage him further. So that's the power of the Aikibi, Naruto thought to himself as he avoided Gaara's arm thrust. Stay still so I can kill you. Gaara screamed, attacking again but he missed. No can do, Naruto replied before sending a barrage of shuriken at Gaara. The shuriken were blocked as Gaara raised one of his huge arms to intercept them. Why don't you just calm down and let's talk about this? Gaara ignored the joking question as he lunged at Naruto again, however he found himself unable to move. Looking back with a growl, he saw Shikamaru holding him back with his shadow. Before he could even think of breaking free, a swarm of insects covered his body. Naruto, you okay? Shikamaru asked, straining to hold Gaara as Shino appeared beside him. Shikamaru, Shino, Naruto asked in confusion as he saw the 2. What the hell are you doing here? Get away before you get hurt. Shikamaru shook his head. We came to help you, you idiot. You can't fight this monster alone. God damn it, Shikamaru. He's too dangerous for you. Get out before you. His speech was interrupted when a gust of sharp wind passed through. He managed to jump away but he soon had to block a blade with a kunai. What the hell? Expecting a person, he was confused to see a wooden puppet in front of him. He raised his leg for a kick, the puppet suddenly backed away. Following its movements with his eyes, he saw it stand back beside Kankuro and Temari. 3-on-1 doesn't seem so fair now, Kankuro said with a smirk. Damn, Naruto growled. Shikamaru, Shino, deal with them and leave Gaara to me. Shikamaru didn't like it but Naruto had a point. They couldn't focus on Gaara with the 2 new arrivals on the scene. Fine, but don't get yourself killed. Yeah, Naruto waved him off as Shikamaru released his shadow. Just make sure to fight away from here. This is going to get ugly. Shikamaru and Shino looked at their opponents and nodded. The Suna siblings didn't like it but they knew that Gaara wouldn't hesitate to attack them. The 4 soon filed out of the arena looking for a safer place to fight. Now that he was alone with Gaara again, Naruto prepared himself for the fight. Gaara was still covered by insects, but they began to die one by one from the corrosive chakra. Soon they were all dead, dropping on the ground and revealing Gaara again. He looked the same as before, only now his legs were encompassed in sand. The manic grin was still on his face and he began to drool slightly. You're dead, Uzumaki, Gaara said with a growly voice. Mother will enjoy your blood. Naruto frowned. Gaara seemed to be getting stronger with every moment that passed. If he didn't stop him soon, he would turn into full-formed Shukaku and it would be even more difficult to defeat him. Sending chakra to his glove, he activated a storage seal inscribed in it and a sheathed sword appeared in his hand. Unsheathing the sword, he held it tightly in his right hand while the sheath was in his left in reverse grip. The sword was a standard Anbu ninjutsu with a black sheath. Let's dance, he said and channeled lightning chakra in his blade as they charged at each other. Naruto was faster than Gaara, which was evident when he ducked under Gaara's huge arms and with a spin, cut one off. Gaara screamed and swung his other arm at the blonde, but Naruto used the sheath to swipe it aside as he cut it off as well. Now that his opponent was armless, Naruto went in for the kill, only to be knocked back by the tail on Gaara's back. Slightly surprised at the unexpected move, Naruto managed to right himself in the air before dropping on the ground in a crouch. His body hurt from the hit, but it wasn't anything that would last. You will prove my existence. Gaara screamed as his chakra spiked. More sand enveloped his body and soon he looked like a miniature version of the Aikibi. The monster snarled and attacked the blonde again, with more speed and ferocity. Naruto began to avoid Gaara's attacks. They weren't precise but they were fast and ferocious, and if a single one hit, it would spell trouble for the blonde. Finding an opening, Naruto batted one of Gaara's arms with his sheath and thrust his sword into Gaara's chest. The mini Shukaku screamed in anguish as Naruto rotated the blade in his chest for good measure. The blonde prepared to pull the blade out, but he had to let it go and jump away before he was crushed. With the blonde away, Gaara pulled the sword out of his chest and snapped it in two before tossing it away with a snarl. Frowning as he saw his sword being broken, Naruto tossed the sheath away as he considered his next move. With his only weapon broken, he had to use ninjutsu until the end. Gaara's thick sand would render his kunai and shuriken useless even if he charged them with wind chakra. His musings were cut short, however, when a barrage of sand shuriken began to fly toward him. He quickly jumped away, but the barrage didn't stop. As he dodged the shuriken, his hands flew through hand seals. Futon. Daitapa. A strong gust of wind flew out of Naruto's mouth at the shuriken, stopping them and sending them back towards Gaara. Wasting no time as he saw Gaara cover his face, Naruto flew through hand seals again as his hands became encompassed with wind chakra, forming two sharp blades. Futon. Kazakiri. With a swipe of his arms, Naruto cut both Gaara's arms off again before spinning around and slamming both of his hands in Gaara's chest. Gaara screamed in pain as blood began to seep through the wounds. Naruto didn't let his hands leave the redhead as he channeled lightning chakra through them. Gaara's gurgling screams became even louder as the lightning spread through his body. Using last ounces of his strength, Gaara moved his tail behind Naruto, wrapping it around the blonde and throwing him away. As Naruto hit the arena wall, Gaara's chakra spiked again. I'll kill you, Uzumaki. Gaara screamed as form began to increase in size. Soon he was taller than the arena itself and almost as wide. Gaara screamed to the heavens as his body emerged out of Shukaku's head, his eyes filled with madness. This is the end. Tanaku Niri no Jutsu. Gaara's form slumped as if he was knocked out and Shukaku's eyes gained life. I'm finally free, ha ha ha. The giant Biju screamed. I will kill you all. Naruto could only gulp as he gazed at the towering form of Shukaku. Oh fuck. 4x. All around the village, the battle stopped for a moment as all heads turned towards the giant beast in the arena. Everyone shook slightly in fear as the venomous chakra could be felt, but the invading forces soon began to retaliate even stronger now that they saw their trump card activated. Jiraiya frowned as he stood atop his giant toad, fighting against the snakes. He needed to clean this up fast so he could stop Shukaku from destroying the village. He was the only one with enough Fuinjutsu knowledge to stop a Biju. Jiraiya-sama, the Shukaku broke free. Ibiki yelled from the ground. I can see that. Jiraiya yelled back. I have to stop the snakes first before I can do anything about the Tanuki. Ibiki nodded and sent his men to better aid Jiraiya. 4x. Ku. Orochimaru chuckled as he saw Shukaku break free. Looks like the village is in danger, Sarutobi-sensei. Sarutobi looked outside with a grave expression as he saw the giant tower over Naruto. As strong as the boy was, the old man wasn't sure he could defeat the Biju. He couldn't help him, however, as he was defending himself from his two dead teachers. Damn it, Orochimaru. How low can you go? I don't know, sensei, Orochimaru said with a smirk. We will see, nay. Sarutobi growled as his hands formed some hand seals. It's time I end this. Two clones appeared beside him as he prepared his final technique. Shiki Fujin. 4x. As Shukaku's laughter bellowed across the village, Naruto was cursing to himself. How the hell would he be able to defeat a demon taller than a damn building? He soon had to avoid being stomped by one of Shukaku's giant legs as the beast began to attack again. Stand still, you puny human, and let me squash you. Shukaku bellowed through his laughter as he continued to stomp. No fucking way, you overgrown Tanuki. Naruto shouted back. Raiden. Jion. A beam of lightning flew out of Naruto's mouth straight at Shukaku, hitting the beast in the chest. The Biju screamed, more out of anger than pain, and in retaliation kicked the blonde away. Naruto screamed in pain as his body flew through the air before hitting the back wall of the arena. He dropped on his knees, coughing blood. How the hell can I beat him? He asked himself, coughing blood. He's too fucking big. Wake the container and the Biju will fall. Naruto froze as he heard the voice in his head. What the fuck? Who the hell are you? Shut up and do as I say. The voice said again, this time sounding annoyed. Well, how the fuck can I reach him to wake him? Naruto asked the strange voice. If you didn't notice, he's enormous. The voice chuckled. Jump. Naruto could only stare in confusion before he heard something flying toward him. 4x. As soon as Naruto dropped to his knees, Shukaku roared in laughter. No puny human could ever hope to defeat me. He was about to go over and crush the blonde when he heard him talking to himself. Angered by being ignored, the beast sucked in air before slamming a fist in his stomach. Futon. Rinkuden. 4x. Time seemed to slow down as a giant air projectile flew towards Naruto. He watched in shock as it neared, knowing that he would be in serious trouble if the attack hit. He didn't know what to do, he had no way to escape the massive ball of air. It was then that a warm chakra filled his system and his eyes turned red. It seemed like he was on autopilot as he jumped over Shukaku's attack and began to run towards him along the arena wall. His speed was frightening and he was sure he could never run this fast before. His eyes were focused only on Gaara's sleeping form as he mindlessly avoided any attack Shukaku sent at him. Stand still, you human! Shukaku raged as he couldn't hit the blonde. He also felt a slight chill as the chakra the blonde possessed seemed very familiar. Naruto however did not stand still nor did he stop when Shukaku's arm slammed right where he was standing a moment ago. Using his momentum, he jumped on the outstretched arm and began to run towards Shukaku's head. Another arm came crashing down on him but he easily evaded it and continued his run. As he began to run along Shukaku's head, sand began to latch onto his legs. He quickly channeled lightning chakra in his legs to stop the sand from grabbing him. After what seemed like eternity, Naruto found himself on top of Shukaku's head. Wasting no time, he jumped towards the sleeping boy and kicked him in the head. Wake the fuck up. No, Shukaku screamed as he realized that Gaara was awake. His entire body began to crack until it fell apart fully, sending the two boys to the ground. The two fell hard, hitting the ground several times before they stopped in place. Naruto grunted in pain as he slowly rose to his feet. His right arm broken from the fall and it hung limply on his side. He felt so much pain at the moment that he could barely walk, yet he couldn't stop now. He slowly began to walk toward the still prone Gaara who managed to look up and saw the blonde approaching. Stay away, Gaara screamed in fear as Naruto neared him. I won't die, I can't, I have to prove my existence. You idiot, Naruto roared effectively shutting the reed-haired boy up. How will killing prove your existence? If you kill everyone around you, there will be no one to acknowledge that you exist. You will be alone, which will be like you don't exist at all. What are you talking about? Gaara asked in panic. Proving your existence means you have people around you who acknowledge you and care for you. People you fight for until your last breath, those you would never hesitate to protect, Naruto said honestly. If you surround yourself with people like that, you will prove you exist. Is that why you're so strong? Gaara asked, somewhat confused. The blonde nodded. There are some people in this village for who I'd give my life without second thought. And the will to protect them makes me push myself harder so I'm strong enough to protect them. Naruto then gave him a small smile. Find your precious people, Gaara, because being alone won't give you strength. Gaara could only nod dumbly as he heard Naruto's words. He was still mostly confused what the blonde was talking about but he was going to find out exactly what he meant. Suddenly the blonde was swept away by a sharp gust of wind which sent him directly into the arena wall. Seconds later, Temari and Kankuro appeared and grabbed Gaara before running away with him. As they carried him, Naruto's words rang in his head and Gaara allowed a small smile. Temari, Kankuro, I'm sorry, he said stoically although a hint of remorse could easily be picked out. The two looked at him in confusion but nodded nonetheless as they approached the walls of the village. Naruto meanwhile dropped to his knees again. He was covered in cuts and his clothes were almost ripped to shreds and completely bloody. With a final bout of strength, he looked up and saw Shikamaru and Shino running towards him. As he dropped on his face he could only hope Gaara understood his words. 4x. It was whole 4 days later that the blonde finally woke up to the familiar smell of antiseptics. Those that knew him were confused as to why the blonde slept so long. He usually jumped back up a day later, 2 days at most. However, they didn't know what he was up to for the last month and they didn't know that he barely slept during his month's break. En route, he slept 2 to 3 hours at best and he stopped training the moment he had to go to the arena. At a fight with a prodigy genin and a giant Biju and the blonde was utterly exhausted. Now that he was awake though, he groaned as his stiff muscles tried to move. He was also very annoyed at the location he woke up in. With some effort, he sat up on his bed and pulled out the infusion tube from his arm. Looking around, he noticed he was alone in the room and he couldn't find his clothes. Sighing, he dropped back on the bed and waited. Someone was bound to come in sooner or later. And not even a moment after he thought that, the door opened. A silver-haired man with a face mask entered with his familiar eye smile. Yo, Kakashi, Naruto said blankly without even looking at the man. The hell you want? To apologize, Kakashi replied with one of his rare serious expressions as Naruto looked at him in confusion. I failed. I know that doesn't mean much and I'll understand if you never forgive me but I had to say it. Naruto looked at him blankly before nodding. Alright, he said much to Kakashi's surprise. Now get me some clothes, I want to leave this place, he added with a grunt. Kakashi looked at him for a moment before he smiled. I'll run to your place and bring you something. Naruto shook his head. I've grown out of my old clothes. I'm going to have to buy new ones, he said with a grumble. Alright, I'll buy you something. I'll be back soon, Kakashi said and turned around to leave only to be stopped by Naruto's voice. I haven't fully forgiven you, Kakashi. One day I might, but not anytime soon. Kakashi could only nod as he left the room. Now alone again, the blonde had to fight boredom. He couldn't go back to sleep since he wasn't tired anymore and he couldn't leave without clothes. Fortunately, another person came to visit him. You're finally awake, Shikamaru said as he sat on a chair by the bed. I think this is the longest you slept in forever, he added with a chuckle. Naruto snorted. Yeah, I usually don't fight huge monsters. So what happened after I blacked out? Shino and I brought you to the hospital. It was pretty calm them because the enemy began to flee as soon as that giant tanuki disappeared, Shikamaru said as he tossed an apple to the blonde before taking a bite of his own. Casualties? Naruto asked biting his own apple. Minimal civilian and shinobi casualties, Shikamaru replied. Also, Hokage-sama. Naruto almost choked on his apple as he heard that. The old man died. He asked in shock. Who killed him? Orochimaru of the Sannin. He trapped Hokage-sama and somehow defeated him. No one knows how, Shikamaru said. Damn, Naruto cursed. The old man was one of the rare people Naruto respected, and hearing that he died was a heavy blow to the blonde. What's going to happen now? The council will choose a new Hokage. Most likely it will be Jiraiya-sama, Shikamaru said. He was also saddened by the death of their leader. Naruto nodded. How are the others? They're all right. Most of them went to protect the civilians so they didn't fight. Sasuke woke up a day later and he was pissed though, Shikamaru said with a smirk. Kakashi-sensei had to stop him from killing you in his sleep. He might have exaggerated there, but with Sasuke you were never sure. Idiot, Naruto said with a snort. He sighed then. When is the funeral? It was yesterday, Shikamaru replied. I missed it, Naruto said with a sigh. Shikamaru could see how this was hitting the blonde hard and he put his hand on his shoulder. Hokage-sama died protecting his village. I'm sure he couldn't wish for a better end. Naruto could only nod at that. He knew how much Sarutobi loved Konoha and he would give his life for the village without a second thought. Sighing, he realized that wallowing won't do anything other than spit on the dying man. If he could see Sarutobi, he would be smiling now. With that, the two moved on to a happier topic as they waited for Kakashi to return. And that's it for now. I'll see ya next time. Yane. In a moderately sized room located in the Hokage Tower, a council meeting began. The clan heads and civilian representatives sat were both present and waited until 3 final members arrived. Somber mood could be felt in the room, its occupants still saddened by the loss of their leader. Soon the door opened and 3 figures entered. Mitokado Homura and Udatane Kaharu were the first to enter. Both were old veterans, serving with Sarutobi during the war. Their features were schooled and their postures commanding. Having been the main contributors to many village matters, they considered themselves very important assets of the village. Only the civilian side of the council showed them respect, however, since the clan heads often found their actions unreasonable and unnecessary. Behind them, Danzo entered. He carried himself proudly, no emotion shown on his aged face. There was begrudging respect from the clan heads for the man as he was very powerful and held Konoha's safety above anything else. That's where the respect ended because many were against his methods and especially the root program. The 3 took their seats and looked over the room's occupants. Seeing that every council member was present, Mitokado Homura stood up. Let us begin the meeting, he began, shuffling papers in his hands. There will only be one topic today. We are going to choose the Godime. Everyone stiffened but no one said anything. Not everyone wanted to go through with this so fast after Sarutobi's passing, yet they knew that it was necessary. Having a village without a leader at a crucial time like this could lead the village to its doom. We have already asked Jiraiya but he declined and set out to find any rumors of an attack from our enemies, Homura continued. Jiraiya, however, nominated Tsunade for the position. Nara Shikaku nodded from his seat. That would be an acceptable choice. Tsunade-sama is a powerful and respected kunoichi trained by Sarutobi-sama himself. There were several more nods of agreement but a strong, commanding voice decided to interrupt. I disagree with that decision, Danzo began from his seat. Tsunade hasn't been seen for over 15 years and she spends her days drinking and gambling her inheritance away. If anything, she should be marked as a nukenin. She is not suitable to lead the village. Clan heads frowned, wondering where he was going with this. Their frowns deepened as they saw several civilians nod in agreement. Homura and Kaharu also looked like they agreed with the man. Who would you suggest then, Danzo-sama? A civilian asked. Danzo stood up. I nominate myself for the position of the Godime Hokage. No one seemed surprised at that. It was a common knowledge to anyone who knew Danzo that the man wanted the Hokage position for years. After the Kyuubi attack, he failed in his endeavor because Sarutobi was alive but now there was no one to prevent him. The civilians, along with Homuda and Kaharu, were all in favor of the idea and the clan heads couldn't do much. Even if they rebelled against the decision, it would only endanger the village in the long run. Very well then, Homura said with finality. As of today, the Godime Hokage is Shimura Danzo. Danzo stood up, barely concealing his smirk and bowed slightly to the others in the room. The civilians read it as a sign of thanks but the clan heads knew what he meant. He was finally in charge. Straightening himself, Danzo addressed the room. The meeting is adjourned. Tomorrow morning we will meet again to discuss further problems. People began to file out of the room silently, some nodding to Danzo while some ignored him. Now left alone with the 2 elderly council members, Danzo motioned to follow him to his new office. The 2 walked behind him quietly and they reached the office within minutes. Sitting himself in the Hokage's chair with a smug expression on his face, Danzo looked at the 2 members. Send someone to collect the genin who participated in the exams, he said. The 2 nodded and left in a hurry, leaving Danzo alone to revel in his victory. His victorious smirk didn't leave his face for hours. 4x. Naruto awoke with a groan hearing the louder than normal knocks on his door. Tiredly, he sat up and swung his legs off the bed before shaking his head, his long hair flaying wildly. He stopped and yawned before standing up and slowly walked to the door. Opening it, he came face to face with a cute brown-haired girl wearing a standard Konoha uniform with a Chunin flak jacket who blushed brightly the moment she saw him. He looked at her in confusion before he realized he was only wearing boxers and he chuckled lightly. Hey what can I do for you? He asked, scratching his cheek. Regaining her composure the girl gave him a small smile. Hokage-sama has requested your presence. Hokage, is this some kind of joke? He asked with an angry frown. The kunoichi shook her head. It is not a joke, Uzumaki-san. Shimura Danzo was elected as the Godime this morning. They announced it to the village 2 hours ago. Still frowning he realized that he slept in pretty late to miss the announcement. Nodding to the kunoichi, she smiled and left while he closed the door and went to get dressed. As he put his clothes on, he mulled over the information he received. Danzo is the Hokage. Sarutobi was probably turning in his grave. Finally dressed, he looked himself over. He was wearing a black sleeveless shirt with a face mask attached, black pants and black knee-high shinobi sandals. A pair of Anbu-style fingerless gloves donned his hands. A dark red sash was wrapped around his waist. His forehead protector was wrapped around his forehead and he tied his hair into a ponytail, leaving two bangs to frame his face. Strapping his pouches, he nodded to himself and walked out of his apartment. As he jumped over the rooftops, he glanced down at the streets. When he left the hospital to buy himself some new clothes, he received many looks of respect from the general populace. He was greatly surprised when the shopkeeper greeted him warmly and even helped him pick out his new clothes. Apparently saving the village from a giant demon would change their opinions of you. It didn't take him long to reach the Hokage Tower and he swiftly walked the steps to the office. Knocking on the sturdy door, he waited until he heard the call and entered. Inside, he found several more people other than the newly appointed Hokage. Kakashi, Kurenai, Guy and Asuma stood with Sasuke, Shino, Neji and Shikamaru in front of them. He had a general idea of why he was here, so he took a spot next to Sasuke, who shot him a hateful glare, and waited. Danzo looked over each genin before nodding. First off, congratulations for reaching the third exam, he said with a fake voice of praise. My advisors and I have evaluated your performances and decided on the promotions. 5 genin stood on attention, waiting for the results. Only 2 of you were found worthy of the promotion. Nara Shikamaru, congratulations on the promotion. The genin in question looked shocked for a moment before nodding. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Normally, he would complain, but Danzo scared the hell out of him. He walked to the desk where Danzo sat and bowed before moving back before his sensei. Danzo's eyes scrutinized the other 4 genin before locking on one of them. Next, Uzumaki Naruto. Congratulations on your promotion. If Naruto was surprised, he didn't show it. He walked up to the desk and bowed. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Looking back at Danzo's face, he saw a strange glint in the man's eyes, but he ignored it for now and moved back to stand in front of Kakashi, ignoring Sasuke's fuming expression. Danzo looked once more at all of them. Dismissed, he said in a commanding tone, and with small bows, the shinobi left the room. As soon as the door closed behind them, Sasuke bolted away, leaving them all behind. Kakashi sighed at his students' behavior before looking at the others with his usual smile. Wanna grab a bite to eat to celebrate the promotions of our 2 new chunin? Wouldn't you want to do that with your team? Kurenai asked with a confused expression. Well, you've seen Sasuke. He motioned at the empty hallway where the boy was only a few moments ago. I can ask Sakura to come though. Still, the more the merrier, he finished with a smile. Asuma nodded. Sure, I'll grab Choji and Ino and we can go, he said smiling. Excellent, Kakashi said happily before looking at the 2 other jonin. What about you guys? Some other time, Kakashi, Guy replied. Neji and I are going to visit Lee in the hospital. Kakashi nodded and looked at Kurenai, who shrugged. I don't see why not. I'll find Kiba and Hinata and see if they want to go as well, she said with a small smile. Excellent, Kakashi exclaimed. Let's meet at that new barbecue place in half an hour then. The other jonin nodded and they all began to leave. As they watched them leave, Naruto and Shikamaru though stood silently in their place. They didn't even ask our opinion, Naruto flatly pointed out. Shikamaru sighed in reply. Troublesome. 4x. 30 minutes later, 6 genin, 2 chunin and 3 jonin occupied a private booth at the restaurant. They placed their orders and sat down, 2 newly promoted chunin being the center of attention. Shikamaru grabbed himself a chunin flak jacket on the way out of the tower while Naruto chose not to wear it. He simply didn't need it. I can't believe you 2 of all people became chunin, Ino said in disbelief as she rested her head in her palm. Not like we asked them to promote us, Shikamaru grumbled in reply. It's going to be even more troublesome from now on. Asuma laughed next to his student and patted his shoulder before lighting a cigarette. Come on, it's not that different from being a genin. Just make sure you don't slack off or you'll end up guarding the gate. For a lazy ass like him it would be a perfect job, Naruto said with a snort and, much to everyone's surprise, lit his own cigarette. Exhaling the first satisfying smoke, he looked at the stunned people around him and put his pack of cigarettes back in his pouch. What, Naruto, you smoke? Kakashi asked, his voice full of surprise. At Naruto's nod, he blinked. Since when? Since I was 7, Naruto replied matter-of-factly. Why, 7, why didn't I know about it? Kakashi asked, still shocked. Because I never smoked in front of you, Naruto replied with a shrug. Why would I even tell you? You'd just take away my cigarettes. And I can't take them away now. Kakashi asked with a raised brow. You can try, the blonde replied with a smirk. The next moment saw Kakashi tossing Naruto's pack in the air with one hand, smiling victoriously. As he looked at Naruto expecting a look of shock, he didn't expect the boy to hold a copy of Ika Ika, Paradise in his hand. Mouth open in shock, Kakashi simply pointed at the book making Naruto smirk. Remember, you didn't take away my lighter, the blonde said in a sing-song voice. Kakashi's eyes widened at the implication and he quickly tossed the pack back to Naruto who laughed and put the pack in his pouch but didn't return the book. My book, Kakashi said edgily while extending his hand. Hang on, the blonde said as he opened the first page of the book. I want to see what's so special about this book. Then he began to read. And didn't stop. Others gaped at the sight of Uzumaki Naruto reading a book. His eyes darted left and right along the pages so fast that the Uchihas would be stunned. His cigarette was burning out in his hand as he was fully immersed in the book. Finally stopping after he read the entire first chapter in mere minutes, Naruto looked at Kakashi with a strange glint in his eyes. This is amazing, he breathed out dreamily. The plot, the characters, the smut, they feel so real. Kakashi had the same glint in his eyes as he locked eyes with his student. It is, isn't it? Many don't see the perfection that is Ika Ika. They're idiots, Naruto replied. This is gold, perverts, Kurenai said while pinching the bridge of her nose. The two turned to look at her. All men are perverts, Kurenai-sensei, Naruto said. Some are just too afraid to show it, Kakashi finished. The red-eyed beauty looked at them blankly. Their food then arrived and the conversation topic changed. They chatted about this and that, joked around. The girls talked to Hinata mostly after she woke up from passing out after hearing that her Naruto-kun was no longer innocent. Several hours passed in a flash and soon they began to leave as the sun began to set. With final goodbyes, everyone went their own way. 4x. Next morning saw Naruto standing before Danzo. He was quite surprised when an Anbu member woke him up saying the Hokage requested his presence. He didn't know what Danzo had in store for him so he quietly stood under scrutiny of Danzo's only visible eye. Uzumaki, I have a mission for you, Danzo said in a commanding voice. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. A solo mission? He asked in confusion. But I'm only a fresh chunin. Wouldn't I have to take missions with a team? Normally, that would be the correct procedure, Danzo began as he clasped his hands together. But this is a delicate mission for only one man and I have full trust in you to complete it. Naruto didn't believe Danzo's praising tone for a moment but he didn't really have a choice. Very well, what is the mission? We have received information that group of enemy shinobi made camp few miles north of Konoha. Your mission is to scout the area and, if you feel you can, take out the enemy, Danzo relayed to the blonde. The primary mission is simple scouting and a team would only slow you down if you needed to run. If you need more information, read this scroll, he finished and tossed a scroll at the bond who deftly caught it. Naruto opened the scroll which contained the location of the possible enemy camp and skimmed through the contents before rolling it up and placing it in his pouch. I'll leave immediately then. Danzo nodded stiffly. Dismissed. With that, the blonde turned around and left the office. No sooner than he left, a single figure dropped from the shadows, getting on one knee in front of the desk. Are you sure this will work, Danzo-sama? The man asked without emotion. No, Danzo replied. I can only hope it will. Fu, take Torun and prepare for plan B, just in case it does fail. As you wish, Danzo-sama, the now revealed Fu said before disappearing again. Danzo was left alone again, hoping his plan would bear fruit. 4x. Naruto jumped through the trees as he traveled towards the possible enemy location. The map pointed at an old monk temple that was abandoned a long time ago and was left to rot. Barely anyone knew it even existed so it was a perfect spot for an enemy camp to spawn. Slowing his jumps as he neared the temple, Naruto stealthily dropped to the ground and skulked through the last line of trees. Peeking out, he spotted the temple, or what remained of it. It was more of a ruin than a temple, as many parts were caved in and the surrounding trees began to cover the still standing walls. What bothered him, though, was that it was strangely quiet. He expected at least some signs of enemy activity but nothing showed. It looked like no one was here in decades. Sneaking around, he spotted an opening in the side of the temple and moved towards it. Getting directly beneath it, he jumped and latched onto the ledge before pulling himself up. Peeking out carefully, he looked around the moderately sized chamber. Whatever beauty of monks' creations was there before, laid in ruins now. Once beautiful statues, now were broken and scattered around, filling the room as debris. Apart from that it was empty. No signs of activity whatsoever. Was Danzo's information wrong? Jumping down in the chamber, he quietly walked around, trying to spot anything. He didn't see anything, however, and stood up with a sigh. Turning around, he took a first step towards the broken doors of the temple but a slow clapping froze him in place. Turning around a split second later with a kunai in his hand, his eyes landed on a familiar man with silver hair and a pair of round glasses on his face. Hello, Naruto-kun, the man said with a smile. I'm glad to see you again. You certainly look different. Kabuto, Naruto snarled in response, his grip on the kunai tightening. I certainly didn't expect to see your traitorous face anytime soon. The man only laughed. Me neither, trust me. But an interesting request came to my master and we didn't have heart to reject it, he finished with a cold smirk. What request? Naruto asked edgily. He didn't think for a second that Kabuto was here alone but he dreaded of who was accompanied him. Oh, I would love to tell you, Kabuto smirked. But I think my master would love to be the one to do it. Naruto's blood run cold as another familiar figure began to rise from the ground. Black hair, white skin and yellow slitted eyes that belonged to only one man. No, to a monster. Orochimaru stood in his full, disgusting glory, smirking down at the blonde. Even with his arms looking dead, he was still as terrifying as he was back in the forest of death. Naruto gulped and raised his kunai slightly, feeling that his chances of escape were practically non-existent. Hello, Naruto-kun, Orochimaru began with a sinister chuckle. It warms me to see you again. Naruto said nothing as he stared at the bigger threat of the two. He knew he couldn't defeat him even in his weakened state. The man was simply too powerful for him to do anything. And with Kabuto here, Naruto was sure he wouldn't be leaving this place alive. Ku, Orochimaru chuckled. Staying quiet I see. No matter, I'm here to speak anyway, he said in a mocking tone. I'm sure you're wondering why we're here. Well, our old friend Danzo wanted us to pay you a visit. Naruto's eyes widened but before jumping to conclusions, he fished for more information. Explain, he said with a threatening voice which only made Orochimaru chuckle more. I don't know if you were aware, but Danzo was after you from the moment the QB was sealed inside you. He always wanted you under his thumb, a perfect weapon at his disposal, Orochimaru began, smirking at the unease in Naruto's eyes. However, Sarutobi-sensei made sure that his old fingers never wrap around you. But with him dead, Danzo wants you. And that's where we come in. Naruto was now feeling even more uneasy. Danzo was behind this, and he wanted him, as a weapon. What is your purpose then? Danzo is the Hokage now, so I'm under his command by default. But old Danzo wants his weapons emotionless, without free will and ready to follow any order, be it moral or immoral, Orochimaru replied with an evil smirk. And we both know you wouldn't kill kids, even if you were ordered to. So we are here to wipe your mind clean and bring you back to him so he could mold you to his wishes. Naruto was growing more uneasy with each word that came from Orochimaru's mouth. You know I'm not going down without a fight, he asked, trying to sound stronger than he felt, but his tone betrayed him. Oh, I know, Orochimaru replied with a smirk. That's why Kabuto is here. I decided to let him have some fun with you before he brings you to me. The blonde's eyes widened slightly, which the snake man noticed. You didn't think I would be interested in you enough to stay here. Cool, I'll see you in a bit, Naruto-kun. With a final round of menacing chuckles, Orochimaru sunk into the ground, disappearing from the scene. Two remaining ninja watched each other, one with a calculating look, other with a condescending smirk. Shall we begin? Kabuto asked. Without a word, Naruto charged at the man, his kunai ready. Kabuto smirked and pushed the glasses up his nose and pulled out his own kunai before charging as well. The two met in the middle of the chamber, their blades clashing. Naruto glared at the man with a newfound resolution. Now that Orochimaru was out of the picture, he had a much bigger chance to leave this place alive. He had to give it his all and go in with the intent to kill. Without wasting a moment, he pushed the Kabuto's kunai and swung his left fist towards his stomach. Kabuto easily blocked it, but he was unprepared when Naruto suddenly spun around and threw a kick at him. Raising his arms, Kabuto blocked the kick with his forearms but was still knocked back by the strength of the kick. You have gotten stronger, Naruto-kun, Kabuto said as he flexed his arm muscles. The kick was strong and it even hurt slightly. But it won't be enough. We'll see about that, Naruto growled and charged again. Kunai met with a clang and the two continued their deadly fight. With each punch that hit home, a kick was the answer. They seemed equal in power and skill as neither could gain edge on the other. Kabuto was smirking all the way, like he was only playing with the blonde. As Naruto threw a kick, Kabuto's smirk widened and his hand swiped Naruto's thigh. The blonde winced in pain and jumped back holding his thigh. What the hell? He asked as he watched Kabuto's now glowing hand. He could already feel the injury in his leg heel, but seeing no sign of damage on his leg worried him. Chikura no Mesu, Kabuto answered. With this technique, I can cut up your insides with ease. I wonder how your advanced healing will respond to this. Naruto growled and jumped back, already going through hand seals. Raiden. Jion. A beam of lightning flew out of his mouth, heading towards Kabuto, but the man avoided it and charged at the blonde again. Naruto quickly leaned back, enough to avoid Kabuto's chakra scalpel going for his neck. If that hit, he would most likely lose because even the Kyuubi couldn't heal a cut windpipe fast enough. Kabuto was fighting fiercely, sending Naruto on the defensive. The blonde didn't have any means to defend himself from the scalpels other than dodging, and any counterattack was rendered useless. Each time he tried to fight back, Kabuto would swing his other hand towards Naruto's vital spot, this sending him back on defense. With that strategy, Kabuto managed to land several blows on Naruto. The blonde was lucky that only his arms and legs were cut because those were the easiest to heal. Several times, he had to let his arms or legs be cut so he could defend a vital spot, but the attacks were wearing him out. Kabuto feigned a swipe towards Naruto's head and the blonde raised his arms to block. Kabuto smirked as the blonde fell for the trap and kicked him hard in the stomach. Naruto staggered back with an arm on his stomach. Kabuto didn't let him recover as he charged and cut along Naruto's left forearm. The blonde grunted in pain and jumped back to gain some distance. Kabuto let him. You are still too weak, Naruto-kun, the bespectacled man goaded. Why not surrender and come peacefully? Never, Naruto growled. He had to finish this fast or he would lose. Kabuto could use his chakra scalpels to slowly cut him up and wear him down. A plan was forming in his head, risky but doable. Naruto charged again as he began going through hand seals. Kabuto smirked and charged as well, his glowing hands prepared. They met in the middle and Kabuto's hand sliced along Naruto's stomach, cutting up his insides. The blonde spat blood but didn't stop and raised his wind-encased hand, slamming it straight through Kabuto's neck. Kabuto's eyes widened and his mouth opened in a soundless scream as he felt unimaginable pain. His arms fell limply to his sides as his body practically hanged on Naruto's arm. He gazed at the blonde with disbelief, realizing now that the opening was intentional. If he could, he would curse, but he could do nothing but watch as life slowly drained from his eyes. Naruto lowered his arm, letting now dead Kabuto slide off it. The body hit the ground with a thud and the blonde staggered back. With the rush of the battle over, he could fully feel the pain in his body. He didn't know the extent of the damage Kabuto dealt him, but he was sure it wouldn't heal anytime soon. Gathering the last ounce of his strength, Naruto ran out of the temple, moving as fast as he could. He had to escape while he had the chance. 4x. Danzo frowned as he read the small note that a snake brought him. Kabuto has failed and Naruto probably knew that he was behind this. He had to act fast if he ever hoped to have the blonde under his thumb. He waved his hand and an Anbu appeared before him. Gather the Jonin for a meeting, he commanded, and the Anbu ninja disappeared to send a signal for the Jonin. Waving again, another Anbu appeared. Danzo nodded silently and the ninja disappeared with a bow. Standing up, he began walking towards the meeting room. It was time for Plan B. Few minutes later he opened the door of the meeting room and entered. Standing before every Jonin in Konoha, Danzo cleared his throat and began. We have recently found evidence that Orochimaru had one more inside man in Konoha, he began, and the Jonin stiffened. They all knew that Kabuto was a traitor, but no one thought there was another. The traitor is Uzumaki Naruto. Whole room gasped in shock. Angry shouting began the next moment as those who still doubted the blonde started to call for his execution. Danzo yelled for them to shut up and they did, albeit reluctantly. Are you sure about that, Hokage-sama? A shocked Kakashi asked. He couldn't believe that his student was a traitor. He wouldn't believe it. Naruto was always loyal to the village and his friends. He could never betray them. We have been suspicious for a while, Danzo began. I sent Anbu to search his apartment and they found several scrolls signifying Uzumaki's connection to Orochimaru. There were also notes on Konoha's defenses and patrol routes as well as a note of a meeting taking place today. Uzumaki left on a mission this morning, probably as a cover to meet with Orochimaru. Kakashi stood silent in shock as he processed this information. Several other Jonin also couldn't believe what they were hearing. They all looked at Danzo, hoping it was a joke, but they knew the man enough to know that he never joked. You are to leave at once and find him. Bring him alive, Danzo finished. Seconds later, the room emptied as the Jonin began their assignment. Danzo was left smirking to himself. This plan would surely work. 4x. Naruto finally stopped after running for several hours. He was weak and tired and dropped on the ground as soon as he stopped. His insides still didn't heal completely and the pain was still there. Wheezing slightly, he looked around to see if he had anyone on his trail but could spot no one. Sighing in relief, he let his head drop. He had no idea what he should do now or where he should go. He was sure Danzo would do something to him as soon as he returned to the village, and in his weakened state, he couldn't do anything to prevent it. He had to rest and heal before he could do anything. He was sure he would pass out any moment now. He cursed as he knew how risky it would be and how anyone could find him here, but he could do nothing as his eyes began to drop. A ruffle of leaves grabbed his attention and he heard someone the moment before he passed out. Well, what do we have here? And that's it for this time. This chapter is a transition chapter for the first major arc of the story. Be sure to review. See you next time. Kakashi sighed as he entered the village. He was out in the woods looking for his student, yet there was no trace of him. Even with his tracking dogs, he couldn't find him. Looking up to the sky with his single, tired eye, he cursed to himself. He couldn't help but blame himself for Naruto's current predicament. Since no one knew where Naruto was for the month before the third exam, many assumed that he was with Orochimaru. He didn't believe any of that for a second, but his opinion hardly mattered at the moment. There was no need to report to Danzo now, so he made his way towards Training Ground 7. Expecting some free time of staring at the monument, he was surprised to see the familiar pink-haired girl running towards him, followed by her black-haired teammate. Kakashi-sensei, is it true what they say? She asked with trepidation lacing her voice. Is it true that Naruto is a traitor? Kakashi sighed before smiling slightly, placing his hand on her shoulder. No, it's not true. I'm sure Naruto would never become a traitor, he finished, squeezing her shoulder reassuringly. The Dobi must have realized how pathetic he was and decided to run away, Sasuke said with a scoff while looking away from the two. It was then that he felt a harsh pain on his face and he found himself sprawled on the ground. A hard look covered Kakashi's face and in a flash he was standing over Sasuke's prone body with his arm outstretched. I've looked past your arrogant behavior for a while now, Kakashi began with a cold voice. I even stood up for you when we were late for the Chunin exams. I always tried to swerve you away from your arrogance, to make you see your fellow comrades as your equals. But even today you see them all beneath you. Well, let me tell you something. He lowered himself and looked directly into Sasuke's eyes. Naruto is always stronger than you. With his eyes wide in shock, Sasuke watched as Kakashi turned around and left the training ground, followed by Sakura. The words of his sensei struck him deep and for the first time, he didn't know how to feel. He wanted to be angry and shout, show that he was better than everyone. Yet, at the same time he felt revulsion and regret for his actions. He wanted to scream but he settled for an angry growl. With his jumbled thoughts, he turned around and left in a hurry. 4x. Orochimaru screamed in anger as he finished reading the scroll on his desk. Killing intent rolled off of him in waves, scaring anyone in near vicinity. It was even worse for the Sound Four who were kneeling only a few feet away. They almost passed out from the sheer amount the man was producing. Is everything alright, my lord? Sakin asked with a trembling voice. No, it's not alright. Orochimaru shouted angrily. First Kabuto died, then that fucker Danzo won't give me the Uchiha. He screamed again and kicked his desk away. Fucking Uzumaki. Should we head out and collect the Uchiha, Orochimaru-sama? Kidomaru asked. No, Orochimaru replied, calming down slightly. Danzo will watch him like a hawk from now on. There is no chance to enter the village undetected now. He growled angrily as his eyes landed on the scroll. He was hoping that even though he didn't capture Naruto, Danzo would fulfill his end of the deal. But Danzo didn't give him Sasuke. And that pissed him off immensely. He lost his best underling in this failure of a deal and didn't even get anything in return. Now he couldn't even send his men to Konoha to capture the boy because Danzo would be there to stop them. His plans were crumbling to dust right before his eyes. What is the plan then, Orochimaru-sama? Sakin asked without a stutter, seeing his leader calm down a little. I need a new body, Orochimaru said without looking at him. Everything else is of no importance to me now. He didn't spare them another glance as he left the room. 4x. Naruto groaned as he woke up. His entire body was stiff and moving only induced pain. Relaxing, he realized that he didn't feel the hardness of the forest ground but the softness of a mattress. His body went shock still at the thought of being captured while unconscious. He didn't hear anything around him and dared himself to open his eyes. He was met by a wooden ceiling with. On his left was a wooden wall with a beautiful painting of a single sakura tree, and on his right a desk filled with makeup stuff and a mirror leaning on the wall, and a bookcase on its side. There was also a window by the bed that showed already darkening sky and a nightstand with a lamp as well as 2 doors which led outside into the bathroom. Straining himself, he sat up and saw that he was only in his boxers. Looking around, he tried to find his gear. Luckily, his pouches were on the desk and he quickly threw the covers away before getting out of bed. The first step made him stumble and a sharp pain passed through his midsection. He grabbed his side and stifled a groan before steadying himself. With 2 more painful steps he reached the desk and grabbed his pouches. He was just about to strap them when the door suddenly opened and his head snapped toward it. One of the most beautiful women he had ever seen entered the room. She was almost as tall as him, with long straight brown hair and shiny green eyes. She was wearing a red silk short-sleeved kimono that reached her thighs, which did nothing to hide her beautiful curves. Her face was that of an angel and her soft, fair skin seemed to glow in the dim lights of the room. The moment she saw him standing there, she flashed him a beautiful smile and entered. "I'm glad to see you're awake," she spoke with a soft and melodic voice, truly fitting with her physical beauty. "You were asleep for 3 whole days. We were worried." Snapping out of his shock induced by her beauty and her voice, he processed what he heard. 3 days. That was almost as long as when he passed out after fighting Gaara. His face hardened then. "Where am I? Who are you and why am I here?" Seeing his tense posture, the woman smiled. "You are in a hostess club in a small town of the land of hot water. My name is Izumi and why you're here," she tapped her cheek with a cute smile. "Will explain someone else." Naruto didn't like this situation at all but he only nodded as the beautiful Izumi left the room. She didn't attack him and he wasn't restrained so he would give her the benefit of the doubt. He was still standing and he could feel the pain in his midsection subside. It wasn't long until the door opened again but this time, it wasn't a beautiful woman who entered. It was a big man with shaggy, long white hair. Naruto was immediately on edge when the man entered and he shifted his body more for running away than fighting. He could feel power rolling off the man and he knew he could not defeat him. The man closed the door behind him and stared the boy down. Seeing the boy's stance, the man broke in a grin. "Glad to see you up and running, brat," he began. "I thought you'd be napping for few more days at least. Your intestines were like a mashed potato when I found you." "You found me?" Naruto asked the man. "Why am I here? Who are you?" "You are here because this is one of my rare safe spots that only I know. And for who I am." The man then grinned widely and dropped in a wide stance. "I am the great and powerful Jiraiya." Naruto looked at him skeptically before his eyes widened in realization. "You're the guy who wrote Ika Ika, Paradise." Jiraiya positively beamed at the boy and pulled out the book in question before rushing to the boy. "You know of my work?" he asked excitedly as he waved the book around. "Hell yeah," Naruto replied and snatched the book from the man's hand. "Now I can finally read the second chapter." Jiraiya pouted at the loss of his book but grinned again. "I'm happy to see the next generation growing up splendidly." Yeah, Naruto said absent-mindedly as he stored the book safely in his hip pouch and placed both pouches on the desk. He then crossed his arms across his chest and looked at Jiraiya. "I'd like to get some answers now." Jiraiya nodded. "Sit on the bed, this will take a while," he said and sat on the chair by the desk. Seeing the boy sit, he began. "But first I want to know why was Uzumaki Naruto branded as a traitor for cooperating with Orochimaru?" Naruto's eyes widened at the fact that the man knew him. "You know who I am?" Jiraiya nodded. "How?" "Later," Jiraiya replied. "Now answer me." Naruto clenched his fists in anger. "Danzo set me up. He sent me on a mission to locate a possible enemy camp but instead of some no-name ninja, I was met by Orochimaru and his lackey. Orochimaru then left so I only fought Kabuto. He was stronger than I thought but he underestimated me greatly so I managed to kill him. He managed to cut me up nicely though." Jiraiya frowned. "Why did Danzo set you up? Did they tell you?" "Yeah, he wanted them to erase my memory so he could turn me into one of his root ninja," Naruto said with an angry nod. "Danzo wanted you under his thumb from the moment the QB was sealed inside you so I can see that happening," Jiraiya said. "I don't see why Orochimaru would do that for him though. Did they tell you why?" Naruto shook his head. "They only told me what I told you. So he branded you as a traitor out of necessity. No one would believe you if you told them about Danzo and he could freely take you after you've been captured," Jiraiya said thoughtfully. "You're lucky that I found you then." "Yeah, I guess I am," Naruto replied with a sigh. "So how do you know who I am?" "I don't think I've ever seen you before." "You haven't," Jiraiya said and smiled. "But I've seen you when you were just a baby. You look just like your father. It made me cry. Now you look even more like him, though you do have some of your mother's characteristics." Naruto was now shocked beyond belief. "Why, you knew my parents?" "Of course I did," Jiraiya replied with a small laugh. "I trained your father after all." Who were they?" Naruto asked. "No," begged the man. Jiraiya gave the boy a sorrowful smile. "Your father was one of the strongest and kindest men I've ever had the chance to meet and your mother was one of the most beautiful women with a gentle heart and a strong temper. They were Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina." "Why Yondaime?" Naruto gasped. "He was my father." Jiraiya nodded and the boy lowered his head. "I see." Now that he found out that the Yondaime was his father, he suddenly understood why the QB was sealed in him. If the Hokage wouldn't be willing to sacrifice his child then who else would? It didn't mean he liked it but he understood. "I was also your godfather," Jiraiya suddenly added. Naruto's head shot up and anger flashed in his eyes. "Why weren't you there for me then?" Jiraiya sighed sadly. "I had a spy network to run. For years after the QB attacked I had to scout for possible attacks. Konoha was in shambles, any hidden village could have destroyed us completely. I couldn't take a baby with me on dangerous missions," he rubbed his eyes. "I would have met you after I finally had time but I knew I could never stay for long and I never knew when I would be back." Naruto gripped his forehead and shut his eyes tightly, holding back tears that threatened to spill. He didn't know how to feel after hearing all this information. Do you have a picture? He asked quietly. Jiraiya nodded and pulled out a small photo out of his pouch before handing it to Naruto. The moment the boy saw the contents of the photo was the moment when the tears broke through. On the picture, two people sat on a grassy clearing. A smiling man with a blonde spiky hair and blue eyes was holding a beautiful red-haired woman with violet eyes. The happiness of the two was directed at a somewhat big lump on the woman's stomach. She was pregnant with Naruto. The boy bit his lip to choke back a sob as he looked at the photo. After a minute he put the photo aside and wiped his tears away. A small and sad smile adorned his face. After all these years of wondering about them, I finally know. They loved you, Naruto, Jiraiya said. More than anything in this world. Naruto gave the man a thankful look and smiled. Thank you, for telling me. Jiraiya waved him up and wiped a tear of his own before the boy could see it. It was due time to tell you. I asked Sarutobi to let me be the one to tell you but I never thought it would take so long. Gigi knew, he asked slightly surprised. Who else knew? Aside the two of us, there was only one other person who knew, Jiraiya replied. I don't know who else figured it out though. I mean, you're the spitting image of your father. Naruto gave a sad chuckle. Can you tell me about them? Jiraiya sighed sadly. Not today, I'm sorry. I have to leave today and I still have to tell you some very important things before I go. I understand, Naruto said with a sad expression. I'll tell you all about them when I return though, Jiraiya said with a small grin. And I have plenty of stories. Naruto chuckled quietly as his mood was slightly lifted. Fair enough. So what else do you have to tell me? First, I want to give you something. Jiraiya began as he pulled out a scroll and offered it to the blonde. During the Kyuubi attack, your parents' house was destroyed. This was the only thing I managed to salvage. What is it? Naruto asked. Open it. It belonged to your mother, Jiraiya replied with a small smile. And Naruto did. Unrolling the scroll and unsealing its contents, a single item fell in his lap. The blonde took it in his hands and gaped a little. It was a tanto about the length of his forearm. Its white sheath shined in the dim light of the room. The handle was black and had a white strap wrapped around it. It also had a shiny gold guard. Taking a hold of the handle, he pulled the beautiful weapon out of its sheath revealing the blade. It looked like a normal katana blade only much shorter. The blade was shiny and only by looking at it, Naruto could tell it was sharp. Extremely sharp. He swung it around a few times, reveling in how light it was. It was a perfect fit for his hand, nothing like the Anbu ninjutsu he used before. Sheathing it, he put it to his side and bowed his head to Jiraiya. Thank you, he said. A lot. Jiraiya laughed lightly and waved him off. Don't mention it kid, he said and pulled out 2 more scrolls. I'm not finished though, I still got something for you. This scroll, he held one scroll a little higher. Has your new clothes. Your old ones were full of blood and dirt so I figured new clothes would be better. And this one, he raised the second scroll. Contains necessary material for one of your father's signature techniques. Naruto's eyes widened. My father's, jutsu. The Rasengan, Jiraiya said and opened his palm. Moments later a ball of wildly spinning chakra materialized in his hand. Naruto looked at the small ball of destruction in wonder. It's a ball of condensed chakra capable of destroying practically anything. Awesome, Naruto whispered in excitement. It is, Jiraiya replied with a grin and took the third scroll. From it, he unsealed a single balloon filled with water. This technique is learned in 3 steps. This is the first one. Soon the balloon in his hand began to expand in certain places. Then it began to distort until it popped and the water spilled on the floor. Jiraiya chuckled sheepishly and scratched the back of his head. Well, you might want to do that somewhere else. So I need to use my chakra to pop the balloon? Naruto asked. Jiraiya raised a brow at the boy's quick thinking and nodded. Seems simple enough, Naruto said scratching his cheek. What are the other 2 steps? This time Jiraiya grinned. You will have to find out those by yourself. Naruto looked at him blankly. Jiraiya laughed again. I know you'll have no trouble doing that, trust me. Naruto sighed. Well, I can't really complain. You've already given me so much. As I said, don't mention it, Jiraiya replied. You can begin training tomorrow. But now I want to go through some things with you. What are they? Naruto asked. I'm going back to the land of fire to find a certain person before Danzo does, Jiraiya began in a serious tone. While I'm away, you have to be careful. You are safest here and you can trust Izumi. Don't leave the club during the day and avoid the streets during the night. While I doubt Konoha would send teams out of the country so soon, I don't want to risk. You can safely train inside, but don't destroy anything. Naruto nodded. All right. Do you know when you'll be back? I'll be away for at least a week, Jiraiya replied and stood up. I expect you to master the Rasengan by then. I will, no doubt, Naruto replied with a smile. No doubt at all, Jiraiya said with his own grin. He turned towards the door and opened it but before he left, he turned to the blonde one more time. Oh, and no shadow clones. Naruto's smile became strained. As the man left, Naruto released a long sigh. He was still processing all information he heard tonight. He was tired and sore and he really wanted to sleep now. He stood up and safely stored the photo of his parents in his pouch and placed his tanto by it. Then he lifted the covers of the bed and slipped inside, his eyes closing already. He was interrupted by the door, however, and he sat up ready to kick Jiraiya out, only to lock eyes with the beautiful Izumi. Ah, Izumi-san, Naruto said with a small blush. What do you need? The young woman smiled at him as she replied. Seeing that Jiraiya-sama left, I was about to turn in for the night, she closed the door behind her. Here, well it is my room, Naruto-kun, she replied with a cute chuckle. Naruto blushed slightly and began to raise the covers to get out of the bed. Then I'll sleep outside. Nonsense, the bed is big enough for both of us, she said with a smile as she sat on the bed. Besides, I was by your side for the past 2 nights already so it shouldn't be a problem. Naruto's blush intensified. He wordlessly moved all the way to the end of the bed, taking as little space as he could. He could hear her chuckle again as she laid in the bed. "Good night, Naruto-kun," she said as she turned off the lamp. "Gee, good night, Izumi-san. It was going to be a long night." 4x. When Naruto woke up the next morning, he was utterly shocked and surprised to find out that he was not alone in the bed. His mind took a moment to process what happened last night and he sighed in relief that he was not in enemy territory. However, as he looked down at his sleeping companion, he suddenly felt extremely embarrassed for she was very close to him. Her right hand rested on his chest while her body rested against his side. Her head was on his shoulder and he could see every inch of her beautiful, sleeping face. Another shock was that, at some point during the night, he sneaked his right arm around her frame and pulled her closer to him. He was now effectively trapped and the only way to get out of bed was to wake her up. Which he did not want to do. That was when her green eyes opened and locked with his blue ones. A smile instantly appeared on her face. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," she said tiredly and yawned cutely. "Morning, Izumi-san," he replied with a higher voice than intended and a small blush crept on his cheeks. As she stopped yawning, she noticed the position of her body and playfully smirked. My, Naruto-kun. I didn't think you were so bold. We only met yesterday." Naruto's eyes widened and his blush intensified. I'm sorry, I always sleep alone so," he sputtered in embarrassment. The beauty chuckled as she gently patted his chest in reassurance. "It's all right, Naruto-kun," she said and began to sit up. "You will have to forgive me but I have to prepare for the day." And with that, she let the top of her kimono slip off her shoulders. Naruto tried not to but his eyes succumbed to the soft skin of her shoulders and he spent next few moments just watching her. It didn't take long for him to snap out of his daze. Azumi's cute chuckle helped, and jump out of the bed, grabbing his pouches, scrolls and tanto before rushing to the door. I'm gonna go train, he said looking back at her before leaving the room. Her amused chuckles could still be heard through the closed door. Finally getting his embarrassment under control, he looked around. He was in a wide hallway which led to another door with a stairway branching in the middle. He remembered Jiraiya telling him he could train inside but he didn't really want to do that in the middle of the hall. So he went to the only other available door. Opening it, Naruto found himself in a room that seemed more like a dance studio. It was bigger than Azumi's and the walls were covered by mirrors. Even the door had a mirror on its back so it didn't disturb the wide visage reflection. It was calm and quiet, perfect for any kind of training he did. He was still only in his boxers though so he dropped everything on the floor except for a single scroll. Unrolling it, he unsealed its contents. Seeing the pieces of clothing appear in his hands, Naruto began to dress. Black pants and his knee-high shinobi sandals came first. There were no gloves or his sleeveless shirt. Instead he had a sleeveless mesh shirt and a short-sleeved gray kimono shirt. He didn't complain though as he put them on. Last of the items was his forehead protector. He sighed as his finger traced the leaf symbol on the metal plate. He wouldn't wear it yet, not until he cleared his name. With heavy heart, he stored it in his pouch. Stretching out, he thought about what he should do first. He was interested in the technique Jiraiya showed him but first, he wanted to familiarize himself with the tanto of his mother. Taking the short blade of the floor, he pulled it out of the sheath. He gazed at the shiny blade and swung it a few times. It was really light yet it looked like it could block any attack. Naruto then began going through the kata he learned while training with Danzo. His body moved gracefully, going through the motions with great care. He soon realized that the style he knew was not suited for the weapon he was using. Since the tanto was shorter than the ninjutsu, he needed to get closer to his opponent and the style he used didn't prepare him for that. He would have to do something about it if he ever wanted to use the weapon skillfully. Sheathing the blade, he placed it on the ground before picking up the second scroll. He unsealed a single water balloon and held it gently in his open palm. Now he just had to pop it with only his chakra. Simple, right? It wasn't though as he spent next 10 minutes looking at the balloon that was only expanding horizontally. It didn't pop and the seemingly easy task became much harder. Naruto did not give up though and he spent next few hours trying. He forced his irritation down as his progress was non-existent. He really wished Jiraiya gave him more tips. 4x. There was an all-around somber mood in Konoha. The village was mostly repaired and its occupants began to return to the lives they had before the fiasco of the Chunin exams. Ninja began to take on missions and the trade routes began to flow once again. A certain group of Konoha genin was more somber than the others though. Teams 7, 8 and 10 gathered at the training ground 7 for the first time since they graduated. The excuse was to train and bond as Konoha shinobi yet there was no training today. One person was on their minds. Uzumaki Naruto was a true mystery. He was the dead last of their class yet he was the strongest of them during the final exam. And now he was branded as a traitor of Konoha and teams actively hunted him across the land. They didn't know what they should believe. Their sensei told them to believe in Naruto yet many spoke differently. This gathering was also for the purpose of deciding where they stood. There was a heavy silence for a while now and one Chunin finally had enough of it. This silence is really troublesome, Shikamaru began from his sitting position. Sakura, you called us here so start talking. Sakura, now center of attention, steeled herself. Do you believe what they say? She asked. Do you believe that Naruto is traitor? Another bout of silence ensued. What do you believe in? Shikamaru asked back. I believe that he is not a traitor, Sakura said with resolution. Sure he did pranks as a kid but he would never go as far as to betray the village. And that is my answer as well, Shikamaru said. I would sooner put my hand in a fire than think that for a second. And he meant every word. Other than Danzo, he was the only one who paid the blonde enough attention to realize that Naruto wore a mask. He didn't know why or what hid behind it, but he knew it wasn't a traitor. But they found evidence. Ino suddenly exclaimed. They could have easily been framed. Strange enough, it came from Kiba. He might have not known about the mask, but he knew he had fun pranking others with Naruto. It is highly possible, Shino said. It was something his father told him about the blonde and what he held that spurred him to comply. And if they're not, Ino asked, then we won't hold back, Shikamaru said resolutely. But until we see him again, I will believe they are. Right, Chubby Akamichi exclaimed. Naruto loves ramen and no one who loves ramen would be able to be bad. Ino sighed as she palmed her forehead. Her eyes then darted between the two who had yet to say anything. Hinata was unusually calm, her usually blushing cheeks were pale and her hands rested by her sides. Sasuke on the other hand was fidgety and restless. It was strange seeing the two practically switch personalities so suddenly. What do you think, Sasuke-kun? She asked the boy whose head snapped towards her. His eyes were wide and brimming with emotions ranging from anger and confusion to disbelief. There's no way that the Dobi went rouge, Uchiha replied angrily. If she listened, Hinata would add a nod of her own, but she was in her own world now. Ino felt a bit embarrassed that she was the only one who doubted Naruto, but she quickly regained her composure. So what do we do now? We wait, Shikamaru simply said. We do missions and wait. When the time comes, we will see him again and find out the truth. The mood significantly lightened after their conversation and soon they began the intended light training. Their thoughts were still on the blonde boy though. 4x. Naruto sneezed as he lay in bed with Izumi lying next to him. After their first morning of waking up together, Izumi had no qualms of resting her head on his shoulder when they went to bed. Naruto also relented after 2 nights and with a much smaller blush put his arm around her. After all, it was really comfortable. Someone must be talking about you, Naruto-kun, she said with a light giggle. Naruto didn't reply as he glared at the single water balloon that rested on the desk. He was not getting any progress at all and his patience was wearing thin. Izumi noticed how tense he was and gently rubbed her hand on his bare chest. Naruto-kun, she said gently, making him break his glare and look at her. You have been training almost all day every day with barely any rest. You really need to relax a little. Naruto released a sigh. I can't. If I don't train, I think I'm going to lose it. And yet you're losing it either way, Izumi replied flatly. Naruto scoffed softly. Yeah, you're right, he sighed again. But all these thoughts just won't leave my head. Then let me help you banish those thoughts, Naruto-kun, she said in a tone Naruto didn't recognize. It was soft yet heavy and it carried some hidden meaning. What do you mean? He asked unsure. Her only answer was to move up and kiss his lips. It was a soft kiss yet it shocked Naruto to the core. Her soft lips brushed gently against his, sending shivers through his body. She parted her lips slightly, placing kisses across his as her hand moved lower to rub his stomach. All the while Naruto was frozen in shock. After a while she moved back slightly to look into his eyes. What's wrong? She asked seeing his expression. Did you not like it? No nota all, the blonde replied as his face heated up. It's just that I've never done this before, she finished for him and he nodded. She smiled. Will you trust me? He nodded. Then just let go. And then she captured his lips again, with a little more force this time. Her tongue began to lick his lips, asking for entrance, and the blonde couldn't help but open them. Izumi wasted no time and pushed her tongue inside his mouth, looking for his own. Their tongues danced around, one skillfully while other inexperienced. She pulled back slightly to nibble at his lower lip, drawing a gasp from the blonde. While they kissed, her hand on his stomach moved lower and into his boxers, enveloping his slowly hardening penis in her soft hand. She gently stroked it as blood flowed through it, making it harder with each passing second. Soon enough, his dick was fully hard, visibly poking out of his boxers. She didn't stop stroking him as his groans became louder and soon she could feel the hard dick throb painfully. Naruto was surprised and annoyed that her gentle hand stopped stroking him suddenly and her warm lips separated from his. Looking at her, she only smiled teasingly and moved back to straddle his legs. Wasting no time, she hooked her fingers at the hem of his boxers and pulled them off, revealing his hard and stiff member to the world. It twitched at the feel of cold air brushing against it. Izumi saw how tortured it looked and swiftly moved lower to envelop the head with her lips. Naruto moaned as he felt her hot breath and her tongue caressing the head. Her hands were not idle and she stroked him, bringing him closer to the edge. Moving her hand lower, she wrapped only her thumb and index finger around the base and squeezed lightly as her head lowered. Naruto moaned again as more and more of his dick disappeared in her warm and wet mouth. Her tongue danced around the hard rod, licking it and coating it with her saliva. She could feel the throbbing veins with the tip of her tongue. With another loud moan, Naruto came inside her mouth, coating her throat with his cum. Feeling the first rope of the hot liquid hit the back of her throat, she pulled back, letting only the head stay between her lips. Her mouth filled with his cum, her cheeks puffing from the amount of thick semen. Some of it managed to sneak through her lips and a trail of cum trailed down her chin. As he stopped coming, Izumi allowed the head of his dick to fall out of her mouth. She then leaned her head back and swallowed until her mouth was free of sticky, white cum. She looked at him as she breathed harder, trying to catch her breath. She slowly scooped up the cum off her chin with her finger and licked it clean. The sight of that was enough to make Naruto hard again. She smiled at him and undid her kimono, letting his eyes roam her now naked body. Izumi was gorgeous with fair skin, slender waist and large breasts and Naruto thought his dick would explode again from simply watching her. Izumi saw the lust and desire in his eyes and leaned down to kiss him again, this time more passionately and hungrily. Meanwhile, her hips positioned above his raging hard-on and the tip of his dick poked her wet opening. She began to lower her hips letting more and more of his dick to disappear inside her. They moaned in unison as Naruto sheathed himself fully inside her. Izumi took a moment to adjust before she began to ride him. Moans of pleasure filled the room as she increased her pace. Her hands gripped his chest while his rested on her ass, squeezing it. He tried to match her pace with his own raising hips, but he failed. Not that it bothered her at all. Izumi then began to clench his dick tighter, which made the blonde groan in pleasure and his dick throbbed painfully. Her lips smashed against his as she felt herself getting closer to her climax. Naruto could also feel it as her walls clenched his member in a vice grip. Her nails dug in his skin as she screamed her climax in his mouth. Naruto was not far away as his hands squeezed her as hard and he began to empty himself inside her, groaning all the way. It took a while before the two came down there high and Izumi slumped on his chest, his dick slipping out of her. They both panted heavily, their sweat mixing on their bodies. Hey, are you relaxed now? Izumi asked the boy beneath her with a panting giggle. Naruto could only nod. Why yeah, he gasped out. Izumi giggled again and pulled the covers over them. With their breathing back to normal, she rested her head on his chest while he wrapped his arms around her waist. Their eyes began to close from exhaustion and the two could only wish each other good night with tired voices before they fell asleep. Before his eyes fully closed, Naruto thought training would be much easier. And that's it. Hope you liked it. Not much action this time. It will however come in the next chapter. Be sure to review. Yane pulled out the sword from his chest. Her glowing hands immediately landed on the wound, beginning the difficult process of healing. She didn't even notice as Jiraiya and Shizune appeared by her side. The only thing on her mind was Naruto and his life that hanged on a thread. And that's all for now. I had a lot of fun writing this chapter, especially the fight scenes. Izumi was an OC which won't appear again. Tsunade appeared in Naruto's Tanto is not what it seemed it was. On a side note, I'm having a difficult time choosing a pairing for this story. Every time I think of one, another pops in my mind, so I'd love to hear your suggestions. Amegakure was one of those villages that were wounded the most during ninja wars. Since its country bordered the lands of fire, wind and earth, it was an ideal battlefield. Being a neutral ground for the three big villages, they could lash out at each other without bringing any damage to their countries. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for Aim's population. Villages were destroyed and many innocent people were killed while Amegakure lost any ninja that was caught in the crossfire. The hidden village itself was mostly undamaged, but the damage to the rest of the country weakened it greatly. It was only due to Hanzo that the village wasn't utterly destroyed. After the war, however, even Hanzo was killed, by his own countrymen no less. And now Amegakure was ruled by a man known as Pain. He was revered by the populace as a god with unmatched strength and he certainly didn't dispute their claims. Currently, the orange-haired god was standing at the top floor of the tallest tower in Amegakure, silently observing his village as the rain poured around him. His gaze was cold and his posture relaxed as his senses spread across the village. He was expecting a report from his two subordinates, yet none came as of yet. He wasn't worried about them, knowing their strength, but their silence was disturbing. His eyes snapped to the left as he felt them approaching at fast speed. He also noticed that one of the signatures was incredibly weak and his brow furrowed. It wasn't long before a large bird flew beside him and entered the tower as its two riders dropped on the floor. The crow dispelled, leaving a cloud of smoke, and Pain's eyebrows rose as he saw one of his strongest subordinates crippled. Itachi, what is the meaning of this? Pain asked stoically, his eyes on Kisami's bleeding shoulder. Later, Pain-sama, Itachi replied. Kisame is in need of medical assistance now. I can see that, Pain said impassively. Zetsu, take Kisame to the infirmary and prepare an arm for him. As you wish, a plant-like man who appeared out of the floor said. The walking abomination picked the blue swordsman up and took him to the infirmary, leaving Itachi and Pain alone. Well, Pain asked, although it sounded more as an order. We have located the Jinchuriki and went to test him, as per your orders, Itachi began. He was in company of Jiraiya, Tsunade and another kunoichi. Kisame incapacitated Tsunade immediately and he took on the Jinchuriki while I handled Jiraiya. You expect me to believe that a genin managed to hurt Kisame to this extent? Pain asked with a hint of a frown on his face. Yes, Itachi replied. At first, Kisame handled him easily but, in a stroke of luck, the Uzumaki managed to cut off Kisami's arm. He also would have killed him had I not intervened. And what stroke of luck was that? The Akatsuki leader inquired. In the middle of the fight, Uzumaki's Tanto blade transformed into a broadsword, Itachi said and Pain's eyebrows rose. The blade was in a perfect position to cut off the arm. As I said, a stroke of luck. I see, Pain said thoughtfully. What of his other skills? Other than Kenjutsu, he showed aptness in Futon and Raiden Ninjutsu, Itachi said as he finished his report. Pain stayed silent in thought for a moment. And this sword, do you know anything about it? Itachi shook his head. At first, it was a simple Tanto. Even Uzumaki was surprised when it transformed. Do you have any idea what it might be? It doesn't sound familiar, Pain replied shaking his head. No matter, it's not important. For now, you will wait for Kisame to heal before you are deployed for another mission. As you wish, Pain-sama, Itachi replied and bowed to his leader before leaving the room. Pain silently watched the rain fall, thinking about the recent events. Having Kisame incapacitated for a longer while was not a major setback, but it still wasn't anything good. The man was a fierce fighter and could complete any mission given. His eyes snapped to the side as he felt his longtime friend approach. It seems that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is stronger than we thought, an emotionless feminine voice spoke behind Pain. The man turned around and his eyes landed on his friend, a young beautiful woman with blue hair and amber eyes. Her stoic gaze bellied no emotions as she looked at her friend right in the eyes. It seems so, Conan, Pain replied just as stoically. What will you do now, Nagato? Conan asked. Will you send someone else after the Kyuubi? No, Pain shook his head, he's not important at the moment. After we seal the other beasts, then I will personally go after the QB. Aren't you worried he will grow stronger in the future? Conan asked. It is of no importance, Pain replied stoically. He will never be a match for a god. With that, the conversation ended and both turned to look at the falling rain. 4x. In a small town on the fire and water border, a single individual slept in a hotel. He was lying on a bed, his chest and half of his face covered in bandages. His long hair spread across the pillow as he breathed evenly. The door to his room opened and a young black-haired woman entered, moving to the bed to check up on him. Shizun's hands glowed with chakra as she checked the blonde's condition. His wounds healed nicely in the 5 days he was unconscious, and she was expecting him to wake up any time now. And just as she thought that, a single blue eye cracked open and she leaned over the blonde. Good morning, Naruto-kun, she said softly, looking at his face. The blonde in question didn't even hear her, nor did he notice her at first as his thoughts slowly started to drift back to the last moment he remembered, a sword being lodged in his chest. Am I dead? Naruto thought tiredly. His eye finally noticed the woman above him. Who is she? Is she an angel? He thought as his eye tried to focus on the blurry image of her face. He saw her dark eyes flash in concern and her pink lips move. A single thought ran through his mind as he looked at her. She's pretty. His arm suddenly raised and he cupped the back of her head before he, much to her shock, pulled her down and kissed her. Shizun's eyes went wide as Naruto's dry lips connected with hers. He wasted no time as he pushed his tongue between her parted lips, finding hers immediately. To him, her soft lips felt heavenly and he relished in them hungrily, moving his other hand to her cheek and deepening the kiss. Shizun stood there frozen as her lips unconsciously began to move alongside Naruto's. She wanted to pull back and break the kiss, but something inside her urged her on to continue. She didn't have much experience as she traveled with Tsunade most of her life, and she had to keep her master out of trouble, which didn't leave her much time for relationships. She couldn't even remember when was the last time she kissed someone. Their kissing session was suddenly stopped when a cough resounded through the room. Shizun shot up instantly and looked at the source, her face as red as a tomato. Naruto also looked at the intruder and he saw a beautiful blonde woman with huge breasts. Am I interrupting? Tsunade asked in amusement, her lips quirked into a smirk. TT Tsunade-sama, Shizun squeaked, covering her red face. What the? Naruto croaked out quietly as his ears finally registered the sounds around him. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his chest stopped him and he immediately dropped back on the bed as a groan escaped his mouth. Good morning, brat, Tsunade greeted the blonde. Good to see you're awake. I'm not dead, he asked quietly as the busty woman moved to him and helped him drink some water from a glass by his bed. Of course you're not dead. You had my pretty self to heal you after all, Tsunade said with a laugh as she placed the glass back on the nightstand. Then, Naruto sputtered in reply as his eyes moved to the blushing form of Shizun. Tsunade chuckled in amusement. It seems you had a good time making out with my apprentice, brat. Should I be worried? Naruto soon sprouted a blush of his own. I'm sorry, Shizun-san, he said embarrassedly. It's alright, Naruto-kun, Shizun replied, still blushing. Another bout of laughter escaped Tsunade's lips as she looked at the other two. Her laughter soon drew out another person as Jiraiya of the Sannin appeared at the doorway. You're awake, he exclaimed as he looked at his godson. Then he noticed the blush on his face, as well as on Shizun's, and the laughing Tsunade. What did I miss? Oh, nothing much, Tsunade replied, waving her hand in amusement. Just our two students making out like teenagers. Jiraiya's had a huge grin on his face as he heard that and he patted Naruto on the back. Good job, kid, shut up, Naruto replied, rolled his shoulders to ease the stiffness in them. So what the hell happened? Last I remember was me almost cutting that fish's head off then. His hand suddenly shot up to his face and he felt the bandages around it. Don't tell me. Yeah, Itachi happened, Jiraiya replied. I'm sorry, Naruto, I failed to stop him in time. Naruto clenched his fists as the memory of Itachi's sword flashed through his mind. No, it was my fault. I completely disregarded my surroundings. I'm sorry I couldn't save your eye, Naruto, Tsunade said as she put her hand on his shoulder. It seems Itachi's sword was coated in some sort of poison that cauterized your wounds extremely fast. I had to focus on your chest wound or else you would lose much more than an eye. Naruto nodded in understanding and swung his legs over the bed before attempting to stand up. His legs almost gave out on him, but Tsunade was quick to catch him. You shouldn't move yet, she said softly as he removed her hands off him. I have to see, he replied and walked toward the mirror that was on the wall, unwrapping his bandages with each step. He looked at his reflection and frowned. First thing he noticed was the scar on the right side of his face. It went from above his brow and over his eye. The eye itself had a gash running straight through the iris and the crystal blue was lost under the ugly dark coloration. His eyes then went lower and landed on a scar on his chest. His fingers idly traced both scars before he shut his eyes and clenched his fist. He slowly wrapped the bandages back around his face to hide the ugly eye before turning back to others. How long until we leave? As soon as Tsunade says you're fit for traveling, Jiraiya replied. He saw that Naruto buried what he really felt now, but he didn't push him. He would talk when he was ready. We were supposed to be in the land of water by now. We also can't risk being seen by Danzo's men who are surely looking for Tsunade by now. Naruto nodded and turned to Tsunade who sighed. As much as I would love to make you stay in bed, I know I can't. Your wounds are healed by now, but you should still take it easy for a while. Alright, Naruto said and sat back on the bed. Then he noticed he was only in his boxers. Where are my clothes? And my gear? Jiraiya tossed him a bundle of clothes in his pouches. Your clothes are messed up from the fight and I don't have another set on me, he said as Naruto began to dress. And your sword is over there, he finished pointing at the weapon leaned on the wall. Fully dressed, Naruto went to his sword and picked it up. It was as light as he remembered, which was strange for a blade of its size. He also remembered a strange voice coming from it, but it was silent at the moment. Figuring it was probably his imagination, he focused on a much bigger problem at hand. How will he carry the sword around? Jiraiya noticed his problem and smirked before tossing something to the blonde. I made this for you. It's not much, but it will do the job for now. Naruto caught the object and noticed it was a strap for the sword. Strapping it around his back, he locked the sword in it and nodded. It wasn't anything special, but it worked. Seeing he was ready, he turned to Jiraiya. Shall we? Jiraiya nodded. Let's go then. Tsunade, Shizune, it was nice to see you again. He smiled at the two women and left the room. Now left alone with the women, Naruto bowed. I want to thank you for everything. You saved my life. Tsunade smiled and hugged him gently. Don't mention it. Just be safe, alright. Naruto nodded as he returned the hug. The two separated and Naruto turned to Shizune. Thank you as well, Shizune-san, he said with a small blush on his face as he remembered their kiss. Shizune also had a small blush as she approached him and wrapped her arms around him. It was nothing. Be careful, Naruto-kun, she finished and tightened her hold for a moment before they separated. Sparing a small smile to both women, Naruto turned around and left the room, following after his sensei. 4x. The pair of student and teacher were currently on a trade ship which would lead them to the shores of the land of water. Both hanged into a couple of forgettable men so as to hide themselves from Kiri's main forces. They would get off the ship when it would stop at the port on the main island before they would run the rest of the way toward the rebel camp. The rebels set the camp on the south of the main island and used the island's natural defenses to hide it. It was a good distance away from Kurigakure, surrounded by rocks and mist, so it was extremely difficult to locate. It was only because of Jiraiya's extensive spy network that the man knew where it was. Sitting inside a small, two-bed room, the two men waited patiently for their trip to end. They were traveling by sea for over a day now and it would take only a few more hours to reach the land. After a full night rest, Jiraiya found it a good time to talk to Naruto about his training for the following time. Producing a scroll, he handed it to Naruto, who took it with a raised brow. What's this? Your training regime, Jiraiya replied. I included a book of basic and moderate fuinjutsu, as well as some of my own techniques and seals for you to practice on. By the time we meet again, I expect you to learn everything inside it. Naruto nodded and stored the scroll in his pouch. You got it, but just so you know, I'm still skeptical about this whole thing. Why would the rebels let us help them? Or train me? Because we have something they will surely want, Jiraiya said, pulling out another scroll and unsealing it. The item that appeared made Naruto's eyes widen in surprise. That's Zabuza's sword, he said. Kubikiribocho. Exactly, Jiraiya said, sealing the sword back. Kakashi told me about it so I went to wave to pick it up. Naruto sighed as he remembered his first mission out of the village. It was both physically and emotionally taxing for him and his team as they had faced hardships that they never faced before. They ended up victorious but they were scarred for life. It was necessary though, Naruto mused. It made him grow as a shinobi. I'll trade the sword for your training, Jiraiya said. Besides, they need all the help they can get and you're practically a one-man army with your clones. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. Jiraiya's plan was sound and the probability of failing was slim. The rebels certainly couldn't let a sword as powerful as the Kubikiribocho fall into the wrong hands. A horn of the ship was suddenly heard, notifying them that the ship was about to land in the port. The two shared a serious look and packed their stuff as they prepared to leave. 4x. An hour has passed since they docked and the two were currently running south towards the rebel camp. It was getting late and the afternoon sun was slowly dimming through the island's mist. By Jiraiya's estimate, they would reach the camp very soon and Naruto was grateful for that. He needed a good sleep to land after such a long trip. It wasn't long before the two sensed several other presences in the area and they tensed, already making plans for if the worst happened. Landing on a small clearing, the two were surrounded by 4 individuals, each wearing a Kiri forehead protector. Stop where you are, the leader of the 4 said with a commanding voice. He was a man in his 30s with blue hair and an eye patch over his right eye, wearing a green kimono. He also had a talisman hanging off his ears. State your names and purpose on this land. Jiraiya of the Sannin and Uzumaki Naruto, Jiraiya responded in a tone equally as commanding. We're here to speak to the rebel leader. The 4 ninja visibly tensed as they heard that. Jiraiya was well known over the word and considered one of the strongest shinobi in the world. The fact that he knew that the rebels were located somewhere around here made the situation even more grave. Why do you want to see our leader? The same man asked, trying to keep the composure in his voice. He knew his team did not stand a chance against Jiraiya, so attacking him was out of the question. The best course of action was to just talk it out. That is for your leader to hear, Jiraiya replied with finality. The man sighed and nodded. It was pointless of trying to find out anything from Jiraiya if the man didn't want to reveal anything. He could also just kill them and continue towards the camp, so trying to fool him was useless. That left only one option. Follow me, he said, and the group of 6 continued to run again. It wasn't long before a large camp appeared in front of them. It was filled with tents and people were milling around, resting or training outside the camp. When the group began to walk through the camp, many saw them in tents, seeing 2 unfamiliar people. The fact that they were walking with their second in command quelled their worries a little though. Soon they found themselves in front of the largest tent and the leader signaled the group to stay outside while he went inside to announce the newcomers. Few minutes later, he returned and motioned Naruto and Jiraiya to follow him inside. As they entered, they were met by 2 other people. One was a boy barely older than Naruto with spiky blue hair and a strange sword on his back. The other was a beautiful woman with long auburn hair and green eyes, wearing a blue battle dress. Also, neither could miss her impressively large bust. Her single revealed eye focused on the newcomers and she stood up and walked around her desk, letting her eyes roam the two ninja. She looked at Naruto first and noticed the bandages over his face. She also noticed he was quite young, so it was unfortunate to lose an eye at such age. Her eye then traced his whisker marks, which she found incredibly cute, and, if the situation was different, she would probably be rubbing them instantly. He was also built well for a shinobi and his chakra level was extremely high. The second ninja, however, she immediately recognized. Long, white hair and the oil plate on his forehead were a dead giveaway on who the man was. Now she understood how these outsiders found them. She stopped in front of her desk and addressed the two. I am Terumi Mei, the leader of the rebel forces. Ao here informed me that you have something to discuss with me. Pleasure to meet you, Terumi-san, Jiraiya began with a small bow of his head. I am Jiraiya and this is Naruto. We have come here to offer you help with the war. Mei raised a brow. A ninja of another village wouldn't come here offering help with such a thing unless he asked for something heavy in return, she said, giving the man a suspicious glance. So please cut to the chase. Jiraiya smirked at the woman's perceptiveness. That is correct, but what I'm asking is training for Naruto here. Now Mei was even more confused. Why would you want us to train him? She asked, glancing at Naruto. Shouldn't Konoha be the one to do it? She immediately noticed how Naruto flinched at the mention of his village. There were some circumstances which prevented Naruto from staying in the village, Jiraiya replied. Why should we spare our time for him? Mei asked. Also, why would you even want to help us in the war? Because it would give him battle experience as well as a potential ally in the future, Jiraiya began. As for why, we have something you would surely like to have in your possession. And what would that be? Mei asked suspiciously. The sword of Momochi Zabuza. The eyes of the three Kiri rebels widened significantly and Mei took a step back. That sword was one of the legendary seven swords Kiri's swordsmen used and having it in their possession would be invaluable. How did you get in possession of that sword? She asked. Did you kill Zabuza? No, it wasn't me, Jiraiya replied, shaking his head. From what I've heard, he died fighting a group of Gado's mercenaries. Naruto here was on a mission with his team at the time, so he might be able to tell you more about it. Mei's eye switched to Naruto momentarily before moving back to Jiraiya. She nodded curtly. Alright, that would be a fair trade. I will allow Naruto here to help us in the war as well as have him trained in exchange for the sword. Jiraiya grinned and pulled a scroll out of his pouch. Excellent, I promise you won't be disappointed, he said, patting Naruto on the back. He'll be a great help for you, he finished, placing the scroll on her desk. Mei took the scroll and unsealed its contents and, with a puff of smoke, a giant sword appeared. The Kiri ninja gazed at the sword in wonder, before Mei turned to Naruto. Alright, I'll have Chojuro take you to your tent and you will report here in the morning so we can discuss your position here, she finished, motioning to the blue-haired boy wearing goggles. Well then, Jiraiya began, patting Naruto on the back. Be good and train hard. I'll see you in a while. Yeah, Naruto replied, waving him off. Just don't get lost again. Jiraiya scoffed. Shut up, brat, he said before turning to Mei. Thank you for your time, Terumi-san. Mei nodded. Thank you for the sword, Jiraiya-san. I give you my word we will train Naruto to the best of our abilities. Jiraiya returned the nod and looked at Naruto. Well, see you later, Naruto, he said, turning towards the entrance of the tent. Yeah, Naruto said as he watched the man leave the tent. The blue-haired boy then approached him and the two left the tent as well. Now alone with his leader, Ao turned toward Mei. Are you sure this is all right? What if he is a spy? I don't think he is, Mei replied honestly. Jiraiya was never known for cunningness and it seems that the boy isn't very fond of Konoha. Besides, he could very well turn the tides of the war in our favor. Did you see his chakra level? Of course, Ao replied with small amount of awe. He has more chakra than Yagura. Exactly. Imagine the power he could generate if he is properly trained, Mei finished. He will be monitored and we won't tell him of any operations. We will start for a while just to be safe though. Ao nodded somewhat uneasily. The situation was both favorable and suspicious. Only time can tell how it will end though. 4x. Naruto and Chojuro walked through the camp silently, neither willing to start a conversation. Chojuro was slightly nervous, seeing that the blonde was an outsider who suddenly appeared in their camp. Naruto on the other hand was tired and had no desire to lead an awkward conversation with the other ninja. He could see that the blue-haired boy was shy and timid, but the fact that he wielded a sword of the seven swordsmen must meant that he was strong. Soon they found themselves in front of a regular tent and Naruto sighed, glad that he would finally get some rest. This is where you will be staying while you're in the camp, Chojuro said. New clothes will be brought to you in the morning when you will be summoned to meet with Mei-sama. Naruto gave him a small nod. Thanks. Chojuro returned the nod and turned around to leave while Naruto entered the tent. Inside was small but comfortable, with a single bed, a nightstand, small desk and a cupboard with a water basin and a mirror above it. He unstrapped his sword and took off his clothes before sitting on the bed with the sword in his hands. Now that he was finally alone, he decided to study it a little better. The craftsmanship of the blade was impeccable and the metal used was both sturdy and chakra conductive. For its size, it was fairly light and easy to maneuver. Naruto grumbled as he realized that he had to adjust his style again. So will you finally tell me who you are? Naruto gasped in surprise as he heard the same feminine voice again. So it wasn't my imagination. Nope, it wasn't, the same voice replied. You can hear my thoughts? Naruto asked, his eyes wide. Yup, now stop beating around the bush and answer my damn question. The voice said heatedly. And what did you do to Kushi-chan? I am Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto replied. And Kushina, my mother is dead. A gasp of shock was heard from the voice. No, how did it happen? She died during the Kyuubi attack, Naruto replied remorsefully, the thought of his mother still hurt. The voice stayed silent for a minute before speaking again. How did you get in possession of me? A friend of mine found you in the rubble of my parents' house and gave you to me, Naruto replied. You were only a tonto though. That was my sealed form, the voice said. Since you managed to unseal me, it must mean you are worthy of wielding me. And since you're Kushina's son, I'll put my trust in you. Yeah, thanks, Naruto said. Don't make me regret it, boy, the voice said with a hint of danger. I won't, I promise, Naruto replied seriously, fully intending to keep that promise. So what's your name? I'll tell you later, the voice said. If you prove yourself worthy though. I guess that's fair, Naruto said with a sigh. Good, we'll talk again later, the voice said. I need some time alone now. Yeah, sure, Naruto replied, but the voice wasn't heard again. With a sigh, he put the sword aside and lay down on the bed. This was becoming really troublesome. He closed his eyes and waited for sleep to claim him. It's a bit shorter than the rest, since it's a transitional chapter for the next arc. Hope you enjoyed it though. Favorite, follow and review, and I'll see you next time. Yane.